So it's so good to welcome all of you here with us in our chapel here today at St. Paul's, and hope that this is a day of peace, a time that you can enjoy being with family and friends as the Lord intends this day of rest every Sunday. No question about it, there are some days that become pretty difficult ones for all of us. And I think about a very difficult day that I had a couple of months after I was first ordained a priest, when I was a newly ordained parochial vicar at Sacred Heart Church, which is in the Shadyside section here in Pittsburgh. And I remember that day well. It was a day in which I felt the pressure of getting ready for an adult faith formation class that I was to be teaching that evening. And unexpectedly, there were not an awful lot of interruptions, or at least I thought of them as interruptions in the course of the day. Lots of phone calls that came into the rectory, and people who unexpectedly came to the office, seeking some sort of assistance. And I was just looking for a little bit of a break to get, some peace and quiet before I would teach my adult class in the evening. That day, the pastor had his day off, and the other priests had their day off, and the cook had her day off. And so I looked forward to going to the nearby McDonald's to have a quick supper before I would teach my class. And I really felt my nerves were frayed by the busyness of the day and by my anxiety about teaching. And so I ordered my usual McDonald's fare. I sat down at the table, really looking forward to the peace and quiet of a couple of moments, and all of a sudden I could feel this shadow overpowering me where I was sitting. And I looked up, and there was a woman who was there holding on to a young girl's hand. It was her daughter, and in the other hand she was holding her tray. And she looked at me and she said, "Father, would you very much mind if my daughter and I joined you for supper?" And I really had to bite my tongue, because I really was tempted to ask her to get lost. But it was only by the grace of God that I didn't do that. And the woman sat down at the table, and I don't remember anything about the conversation, except it was very pleasant. And when she and her daughter finished their meal, they went off. I finished my meal, went back to the parish to teach the adult faith formation class. I never saw the woman again. But 5 years later, when I was leaving Sacred Heart Parish to move to a brand new assignment, at the very last Mass that I had at Sacred Heart, 7:45 on a Sunday night, the ushers came up after Mass, and they said there was a woman in church, and she specifically asked that we personally give you this envelope. And I waited till I got up to my room, and I opened the envelope, and it read, "Dear Father, I'm sure that you don't remember me. But 5 years ago, my daughter and I saw you at a McDonald's. And we asked if we could join you at table for supper, and you were ever so kind. What I didn't tell you then, I can tell you now. I had intended that to be our last supper. I was intending to kill my daughter and myself right after that supper was over. And I didn't, because you were so kind to me." I tell that story every so often, and I do it so as a reminder that my actions and my words, and all of ours as well, can have a great impact, either positively or negatively, on other people. As you and I had a chance to listen to the second reading today that comes from St. Paul's first letter to the church of Corinth, there are 3 words that are powerfully presented to us for reflection today. Avoid giving offense. I don't deserve any credit for what happened at that dinner at McDonald's. I've already hinted to you what my mindset was, that I could have been tempted to tell the woman to get lost. It was only by the power of God's grace that I didn't. But it's important for all of us to realize that our words and our deeds do matter. They matter in our relationships with each other, and they do matter in the face of God. You know, Paul wrote those 3 words, avoiding giving offense, because the Christian community in Corinth was living in a very pagan society. And in so many ways, they were being tempted to go through the licentious ways of the people in Corinth. They needed to be reminded that as representatives of Jesus Christ, as people who believed in him, they needed to make sure that their actions, that their words and their deeds match the faith that they professed from their lips. And no wonder that after Paul offers that particular strong advice to the Corinthians and says, whatever you do, do it all for the honor and for the glory of God. Don't do it for yourself. Don't do it for your own honor. And even don't forget about how you've got to have a positive impact on other people in this pagan society of Corinth. And you know, we need to be able to take a cue not only from Paul's writings to Corinth, but especially to the action of Jesus in today's gospel. Isn't it interesting that last Sunday when we gathered together to celebrate Holy Mass and heard the gospel last week, and today once again we hear, after Jesus has performed either an exorcism last week or a miracle today for the leper, when he says, now please don't go and tell everybody what happened here. And the reason why Jesus did that is because once again he was giving the leper, but all of us in the retelling of the story, the important charge that we all have, that everything that we do in our lives is meant to help build each other up, but for the honor and glory of God and for the sanctification of everybody. Part of the reason why Jesus gave the instruction that he did is that he didn't want the honor to be coming to him. He didn't want the attention to be coming to himself as the healer. He wanted the attention to be given on why he was healing, or why he was exercising, or why he was forgiving. He was trying to point people to the kingdom of God in heaven, to the ultimate destination of us all. And the very thing that Jesus feared when he gave the advice to the leper today in today's gospel, or to the one who was exorcised in last Sunday's gospel, is because he feared that people were going to miss the point. They were going to miss the message about working for salvation, about working for the kingdom of God, and rather just pay attention to himself as the healer. And people would come, naturally, as we would all expect, looking for some healing, then walk away as if nothing happened. There wouldn't have been a big change in their life except for what happened at that moment. And what Jesus wanted to make sure is that by his presence, our lives would be changed. That our lives would seek to become more like his. Well, you know, my sisters and brothers, as I take a look at those 3 words in today's reading from Paul, avoid giving offense. It might be a good idea for all of us to think about that in preparation for what's going to happen this coming Wednesday. You know, when we will come together to begin the holy season of Lent. And while lots of times in our lives, you know, we take a look at Lent as a time when we've got to give something up, that we've got to sacrifice, and that's important to do it, but not simply as an empty practice, but as a practice that gives us full view to how we need to become more like Christ. But you know, it's also important for us to remember that as we prepare to begin the season of Lent, it isn't just our sacrifice. It's not just our fasting. It's also our praying that's important, that needs to increase. And also it's our good works. Seems to me that Paul's words are a good prep for us as we take a look at what will be our discipline for Lent. And especially that we take his advice about avoiding giving offense. And the ways, unfortunately, that you and I do that. By the ways in which we're uncharitable in our comments to or about other people. Or maybe by the kind of jokes that we tell that are disrespectful to God's creation. Or the ways in which we may use language that should not be acceptable in company. Or the ways in which we seek to be independent of everybody else. Or the ways in which we don't tell the truth. Or the ways in which we're stingy. Or the ways in which we might be prone to anger and impatience without considering the impact that it makes on other people. You got to believe there are not many days that go by in my life that I don't think about what could have happened if in my having a bad day I could have said to that woman and her daughter to get lost. The terrible consequences that could have had. It was by the power of God's grace that I welcomed her at the table, and in the end, without my even knowing it, her life was spared. May we, in a very special way, remember that what impact we have on other people, especially as the followers of Jesus Christ, can in fact help bring them closer to God. As you and I listen carefully to the words of St. Paul, avoid giving offense. May we take that ever so seriously and seek always in everything that we do and say and think and plan, seek to always be a reflection of Jesus himself.